back to where I was. Making this truly multi-species, so every section has a single species designated, but every section probably has more than that. So if I've got a section for greater sage-grouse, it's probably got habitat that would be good for longspurs or for pipits. So it's probably a way to really kind of integrate these different things. We just haven't figured out how to do it yet. And again, continuing to monitor and then working with ranchers to increase achievement of those targets. Incorporating additional monitoring would be lovely. I think this is my last slide. So other things that we're doing at the park, we've got a Bison Conservation herd that is in 18,000 hectares, so about 40,000 acres. They're kind of left to do their own thing. Another reason we'd like to have fire, because then we can attract them to a specific area and get them to graze that area. Beneficial cattle grazing, talked about that lots. Traffic mitigation, so Grasslands National Park, we've got a lot of traffic obviously, visitors coming in to see the prairie dogs and other things, so we do get a lot of roadkill. So in our multi-species action plan, roadkill was identified as a big problem for a number of different species, so we've got some traffic mitigations, we've got located some hot spots where there's exceptionally high mortality from traffic, and so then at certain times of year we might put in a reduced speed, something like that. And again, I've talked lots about prescribed fire. Yeah, happy to. I have no idea how long I just talked for, so I don't know. It's okay. Yeah.
You talk about moving, you know, the place you're working with. Do the species migrate with you, or you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So because these birds, for the most part, are migratory, so they'll leave in the winter time, and then they'll come back in the spring, and they'll be at this higher level, kind of looking for appropriate habitat, and they might see a black area because it was burned, or something that's brown because it's heavily grazed, and they'll kind of zoom in on that, and if that's what they like, that's where they'll go. Other species, we do focus a lot on birds. Leopard frogs, probably not gonna move so much.
Is the second bird there a four-wheel?
This is a common nighthawk.
A what?
A common nighthawk.
Oh, a nighthawk.
Yeah, and they're another species that they nest in, like, they would nest on this floor.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, they do, most of them leave and then come back and they'll find a suitable area, and there's been, people try, so in forest ecosystems, it's really awesome because you can get repeated captures of the same bird over 10 or 20 years even. In grasslands, there's hardly any recaptures because those birds are just, they evolved in this landscape that had fire and grazing that was always moving from year to year, and so they're adapted to kind of move around like that. Yeah.
Maggie?
Yeah.
As a rancher, I'm curious about the, like the bidding and the, what kind of a contract do you have with these people that are grazing inside the park?
Yeah, so that's
Do you need a permit, or like what do they do, like, and what is,
that's a really good
do
question.
they have to bid for that?
Okay, so there's a couple different answers to this question. So for this specific project, we chose, because of this, I didn't say this earlier, so thank you for asking. We specifically chose to work with this landowner, and this landowner, and this landowner, because they are inside the boundary. So they don't have a competitive process. We're working with them. That's
They don't have to legally, you don't have to bid that out, or?
No, for this specific project we don't. We do have a grazing permit that is here. This one is a competitive thing, people bid on it.
Okay.
And then, I don't think I have oh yeah, right there. So grass for the west block, so the bison paddock is here, so obviously that's not available. We do have 2 licenses of occupation, and those are competitive, and they're 5 years. So people put in a pretty detailed proposal on how they're gonna manage this and how they're gonna take into account all of the parks, legal requirements and that sort of thing. We've got a couple of others that are simple permitted grazing, again, that's just basically the highest bidder with some, we wanna work with people who are interested in achieving some targets, even if it's not specifically for that purpose. And Grasslands has a special amendment in the National Parks Act that allows us to have domestic grazers in the park. That's not
Without
allowed.
going through Treasury or,
Yeah, it's not allowed in any other parks, so,
so you have to be a park to get that, to have that authority to, is that right?
I'm not sure I understand your
So
question.
you're saying because you're a park, you don't have to go through that Treasury and the,
Which, I guess I don't know which, so what process are you,
well, with the
Somewhere
immediate
else?
neighbors?
right?
And how could you, how does your boundary take in other people's property? I don't understand that quite either.
So that is on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. We often get a
So you
lot
have
of-
to write a first refusal on that map?
We
Is that
don't,
what you're-
we don't actually, so, it's a little bit, I don't know, where are you from? Here, area, okay, so there's, there's a little bit of annoyance, as you can imagine, with the park, because as the federal government, there's often the highest bidder to a rancher who's selling is gonna be the park. And, yeah, so that's been a problem in our area, because there's a lot of, concerns about that. In this area, we don't have right of first refusal, but there is, so because it's crown lease land, usually you can buy that out at certain intervals. The stuff within the proposed boundary, they can't buy that out. We can't, so if Miles, for example, was gonna sell, we don't have right of first refusal, he can sell that to anyone he wants, but often it comes down to dollars, so, but not always. I don't know if that answers your
Well,
question.
kind of, I'm just relating your relationship with these ranchers and what we're kind of being committed to with Environment Canada, with
Yeah,
these three
we've got them
pastures
on.
here,
Yeah.
and having to go through Treasury Board and bids.
Yeah,
and-
so they wouldn't, I don't know the circumstances around that, but they're not a national park, which is the legislation that basically says no domestic grazers. So I don't know what legislation is kind of bogging you down there, but
Well, I don't know if we've even been
Well,
designated.
there isn't any, because we have no designation.
yeah, it's kind
that's
of
the
a
problem.
weird, nebulous, we don't really know what's happening. Yeah.
How many cattle do you permit?
So with these collaborative agreements in the East Block, there's not really a number associated with that, because we want them to be collaborative so that they can kind of decide how many cattle they need to achieve those targets. In the West Block, it is a little bit more prescriptive, where there's a cap, there's a total number of cattle that they're allowed to have.
But like, the people that are bidding for those permits, how many are they permitted per permit, I guess is the best way.
Yeah, so that's specific to the permit, so like this area, it'll say in the request for proposals, it'll say you get 200 AUMs from May 1st to September 1st. And then they'll basically put a price, like, I'm gonna pay you this much to use that. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Awesome, well, thank you very much, Maggie.
You're welcome.
She had a long drive this morning, so thank you. And thank you to I also want to thank our presenters from earlier, Catherine and Brad, too, for coming all the way in from Lethbridge. We have a quick addition to our agenda today. Lori from the Saskatchewan Burrowing Owl Interpretive Center will just do a quick 5-minute presentation about burrowing owls, and then we'll move into our coffee break, and you can have a bit of time to, I guess, ask Lori questions about burrowing owls. So with that, I'll call up Lori. And And our coffee break was
You can lose that.
No, I'll bring us the bread. I have a bakery next door and a really good bakery.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting Cricket and I to come out and join you on your day here and give you a little bit of information about the Burrowing Owls and the center in Moose Jaw. So we are from the Saskatchewan Burrowing Owl Interpretive Center in Moose Jaw. And basically, we're more of an educational facility. And you guys have been talking a lot today about, land conservation and stuff. And we tend to do more of an educational focus. So our mandate is actually to promote the conservation of the endangered burrowing owl and their prairie habitat through education, conservation, and stewardship. And we are quite lucky that we actually have a small group of burrowing owls that stay with us year-round. They are a captive population, but historically Moose Jaw was a hot spot for a group of burrowing owls that returned every nesting season to various areas or locations around the city of Moose Jaw. And as the population began to dwindle in the wild, we saw that perhaps it was time to begin an educational conservation outreach program with the owls. So we actually have 3 little owls that are hand-raised that we're able to take out and travel around and give people the opportunity to actually see these little guys in person. Because as many as you may know, it's getting harder and harder to find them in the wild. They are an endangered species and have been so since 1995. And unfortunately, our numbers, still haven't really recovered from the dramatic decline we saw in the early 80s and early 90s. We see yearly increases or decreases depending on, how the breeding season goes. Unfortunately, they are still classified as an endangered species throughout Canada. So Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, and BC are typically the areas where you find the Canadian burrowing owls or the western burrowing owls nesting. And very lucky in this area, Grasslands National Park, as Emily was talking about, is home to anywhere between 15 to 20 nesting pairs of owls. So they play a very important part in protecting not only the burrowing owls, but all the other species at risk that Emily was talking about. So, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. I know you guys have been anxiously awaiting coffee and donuts. So I'm just gonna, as you guys go for your coffee break, I'm just gonna stand off in the corner. You guys want to come and get a closer look at Cricket, and take some pictures. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to come out and just give you guys just a quick little spiel.